Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel. And welcome to the first episode of The Freedom Ledger. The Freedom Ledger, All You Need to Know, Volume 2010, Issue 94, Sunday, April 4th, 2010. Doc Holliday Strikes Again by Fletcher Felix. Today, as a large number of Fredonians were spending Easter Sunday at various services around the city, Doc Holliday struck again. This time, he struck in the theater district, and it is assumed he was going after a nearby art gallery that has an exhibit on religious art at the moment. This year, he dressed up as Jesus from the Crucifixion with a cross that shot some sort of red acid-like liquid. The FCPD was able to contain him until the Price of Freedom SWAT arrived and was able to drive him off. Unfortunately, they were unable to apprehend him at this time. This marks Doc Holliday's 7th such attack on a large holiday here in Freedom. Many will remember his attack from 2.5 weeks ago, where he dressed as St. Patrick and attempted to steal all the snakes from Hanover Zoo. We assume he will be back for the 4th of July, with some sort of Uncle Sam and fireworks costume, and we wonder what his attempt will be this time. Obamacare hits newest roadblock by Pat Douglas. Just the other day, President Barack Obama was able to sign the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act into law, as the act passed in both the Senate and House of Representatives with small majorities. It will be 4 to 6 years before the bill is fully implemented, but already it has had its challengers. On the day of signing, 14 states stated their intentions to sue the federal government over various parts of the law. The most often cited part of the law to be challenged is the expansion of Medicaid, followed by the part that requires employers to cover birth control costs as part of their health insurance coverage. So far, New Jersey is not one of those states, and we hope it stays that way. The Freedom Ledger, page 2. Nicholas Rourke, released from Providence Asylum. Most Fredonians will remember the 1980s and August Roman, the main head of organized crime in Freedom City. Just as we are sure that you remember the Centurion, the first of the new mystery men here in Freedom back in the 1930s, who fought crime until he put up his costume after the passing of the Moore Act several years ago. You may also remember Nero, August's main arsonist and assassin. Nero was captured due to the acts of the Centurion before bringing down August Roman, and it was revealed that Nero was a man named Nicholas Rourke. Mr. Rourke was deemed unfit to stand trial and was committed to Providence Asylum, where he has remained since 1987. Just this last Friday, Dr. Ashley Ellis, the administrator of the Providence Asylum, decided that Mr. Rourke was cured and deserved to be released into the general population. While we here at the Freedom Ledger are not psychologists, nor are we trained in mental health, we do remember what Nero did at the height of his crime spree. We do not disagree with Dr. Ellis's prognosis, as again, we are not trained as she is. However, we would recommend that the people of Freedom remember what Nicholas Rourke did in the 1980s and what he is capable of. August Roman's crime empire was taken down in 1992 by the Centurion. However, Mr. Roman managed to escape justice, although it is thought that he died, as he has not been seen in 18 years. Providence Asylum was opened in 1908, and its first director was Dr. Reginald Carter, who was the director until his disappearance in 1928. Dr. Carter's disappearance has never been solved and is still considered an open case with the Freedom City Police Department. Hatari Militia Arrests by Chi Kirby. In the last couple of days, a series of raids carried out by the FBI and Aegis have led to the arrests of 9 members of the Hatari militia on their alleged involvement in a plot to kill police officers. Their plan, which was stopped in the very early stages, was to kill a police officer in Michigan and then, using improvised explosives, They were going to attack the police officers who came to the funeral to pay their respects to their fallen comrade. It is believed that this plan was due to the Hatari belief that we are in the end of times, and soon there will be a great battle between the faithful and an army of demons, which will be supported by the government. It is believed that the FBI, Aegis Investigation, had some help from a member of a different militia in Michigan. The charges that the nine face are seditious conspiracy, attempted use of weapons of mass destruction, teaching the use of explosive materials, and possessing a firearm during a crime of violence. The federal grand jury in Detroit hearing the case is expected to hand down a decision to go ahead with those charges in the next couple of days. Dr. Julius Wells attacked in his home by Autumn Bayard. Dr. Julius Wells, one of the many scientists who work at Astro Labs, was found unconscious in his Bayview home this morning after an apparent early morning break-in. Dr. Wells claims nothing was stolen, but there is no telling, with the robber having a fair amount of time essentially alone in the house. The Applied Scientific and Technical Research Organization, ASTRO, was founded in 1942 by Dr. Alan Grant here in Freedom City and is the largest scientific research company in the world. It is centered in the North End near the FCU campus just across the river from Hanover Institute of Technology. The other two scientific research companies that come close are Grant Conglomerates, also Freedom City, and Orwell Industries, centered in Faribault, Pennsylvania. Dr. Wells claims to have been working on a formula that may make warp speed possible in the near future. The current problem with warp speed is that while a ship can travel at close to 10 times the speed of light, the energy required to do so requires a fuel mass similar in size to Jupiter. A new paper Dr. Wells is peer-reviewing claims that by changing the shape of the field from a circle to an ellipse, the energy needed can go down to needing a fuel mass the size of a satellite. The Freedom Ledger, page 3. Cone Technologies by Terry Burris. Cone Technologies is a research and development biotech and chip tech company with facilities worldwide. Founded 15 years ago by Martin Cone in Phoenix, Arizona, Cone Technologies has slowly grown to become a pillar of the medical community. One of the pillars of Cone Technology is the many advances in prosthetic technologies that they have made over the years. They are leading the charge in cybernetic prosthetics, and no one is, at least publicly, even in the same ballpark as Cone Technologies in that field. They have also made several other key advances in the treatment of long-term disabilities over the years, including a new dye and imaging technology that allows more precise images to be created of a site. Now, in most stories of large companies that have made large advances in a specific field for the general good of mankind, there comes a point where we talk about the personal tragedy that the founder had or his family had. But Martin Cone does not have that story. Martin Cone was a very successful man with degrees in engineering and biochemistry who decided to go into the medical field. He is 45 and a native of Phoenix, and Cone Industries started as a small shop where he custom-made prostheses for local amputees. He turned that lucrative business into an ever-growing company that was quickly able to create a research and development arm. This arm quickly became the main focus of the company and has since become the entire company. Freedom City Comets by Wilfredo York. The Freedom City Comets are off to a great start this year. They just finished their first series of the season against the Chicago White Sox here at the Liberty Dome. They shut out the Sox 6-0 in the first game, won 3-2 in the 12th inning in Game 2, and won a back-and-forth game 5-4 to finish out the series. Tonight they're on the road, starting a series in Detroit against the Tigers. Head coach Russell Mills has a potential dream team on his hands if he can get the team to work together as a whole. And judging by the first 3 games of the season, he may have done that after several years of trying. Later this month, they play their first series against the hated rivals, Vancouver Flags. If you remember, the Flags were Freedom City's original baseball team, but they left in the early 1990s when the city refused to build a new stadium for the team. The owner, Matthew Sandston, could not accept the idea of continuing to play in the Liberty Dome and moved the team to Vancouver, British Columbia. Freedom then had no baseball team until just a few years ago when Scott Hamilton and the Beaumonts sponsored and purchased the Comets. After several seasons of a decent showing, it is hoped that Russell Mills will bring the team to the playoffs either this year or next. Disclaimer, the Beaumont family, including those who bought the Comets, are the owners and publishers of this newspaper. Possible mob enforcers found dead by Helen Hardin. This morning, 5 men with suspected ties to the Freedom City mob have been found dead outside a warehouse that is suspected to also have ties to the Freedom City mob. A source at the Freedom City Police Department said the bodies looked as if they were hit by a wrecking ball covered in bubble wrap. It is clear that they were hit by something large and powerful that caused a lot of blunt force trauma, but did not leave any marks on the outside of their bodies. The source, who has a long history on the force, has said this is one of the most confusing and troubling deaths they have ever encountered as a police officer. More than just that were the position of the bodies and the state they were in. It is clear that they fanned out as if to try and discover something, and none of them seemed aware of any of their fellows being attacked, which implies that either each of them got attacked at the same time, or they were somehow deprived of their senses. If these men were a part of the Freedom City mob, they deserve to stand trial for their crimes, and if they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, it is, if possible, worse that they were murdered. We here at the Freedom Ledger do not condone vigilante killings, no matter who it is of. The Freedom Ledger, page 4. From the Editor's Desk, by Jerry Jones. Freedom. We need to talk. We need to talk about the price of freedom SWAT we have in our fair city. Though, to be honest, a more accurate name for the group would be Price of Security. But I'm sure we get what Commissioner Alquist was going for when he created the squad. They are heavily armed and armored. They are heavily armed and armored and have essentially a carte blanche. Now, I understand they're supposed to protect us from superpowered individuals, and especially with the MORE Act, we don't have anyone else to help us. But how long before they turn their vast arsenal on us? Also, can we take a moment to acknowledge the insanity of Dr. Tomorrow's sentence of 40 years for violating the MORE Act? The MORE Act drove most of our heroes to hang up their costumes and go into retirement. Those who didn't now look at Dr. Tomorrow's sentence, and most don't bother following any law. And can we blame them? If just trying to keep your city safe while protecting your identity is enough to put you in Blackstone for several decades, why would you follow any other law? Honestly, the surprising thing is some of these now so-called lawless vigilantes follow most of the laws in our fair city. Also, remember that despite what Commissioner Alquist would have you believe, the Price of Freedom SWAT is not our first group of mundane people who fought against these superpowered villains. As Dr. Adam started searching for lost civilizations and the rise of the modern mystery men in the 20s and 30s, Freedom City saw the creation of a group called the Science Brigade, who fought against the paranormal and evil mystery men. In the later 1960s, we had the Dog Pound Squad, a more rough and tumble group who didn't last too long. We have to ask ourselves, how much is too much? And how long will we put up with the excesses and threat of overreaching by this arm of the Freedom City Police Department? Remember, the price of freedom is the brainchild of the police commissioner who serves at the request of the mayor. We have a mayoral election coming up in 2012. It may be time we said we have had enough of Mayor Moore and his administration. Magpie strikes again in Italy. Magpie, the most daring and possibly skilled thief in Europe, struck again last Wednesday in a private villa in Tuscany. This time, the haul was kept inside a large, hermetically sealed vault that had a series of alarms that never went off. Magpie is known for the daring and seemingly impossible thefts, mostly of jewelry or art, but occasionally the target will be heavily secured data. Magpie sits at the top of Europol's most wanted list. Despite that spot, and despite almost a score of scores, very little remains known about Magpie. Magpie is best known for leaving black playing cards with a black magpie in a red circle at the scene of every crime, in some hard-to-reach but easy-to-spot location. Luckily for Freedom City and the rest of the United States, Magpie, so far, only operates in Europe. Magpie is believed to be a rather nondescript but handsome man in his mid to late 30s who is described as intelligent and charming. This description comes from a man matching that description being noticed at the site of places hit by the Magpie in the days and hours leading up to the robbery on multiple occasions. That being said, there has still been no positive identification on the robber, despite the best efforts of Home Security and Europol. Tenement building in the Fens burns down, by Ezra Burke. Saturday night, a tenement building in the Fens burned to the ground after a large blaze enveloped the building. Of the approximately 600 people who lived in the building, it is believed that roughly 275 perished in the blaze. The true number of dead will most likely never be known due to a variety of factors, including an unknown number of squatters and extra people staying in various apartments in the building. Another reason is tied to where the fire is believed to have begun. According to the Freedom City Fire Department investigators, the fire most likely began in the apartment of one Daniel Foreman, a Freedom City native. It is unknown if he was at home at the time, and according to said investigators, if he was home, the fire burned so hot in his apartment and several neighboring apartments, there would be nothing left to find. The fire spread very fast through the building, and within minutes the entire place was ablaze. And one of the big reasons why only less than half the known inhabitants were killed is the fact that a large number of them work third-shift jobs on Saturday and Sunday nights. So a large number of the people who would normally be at home were at work, and so avoided the fire. However, there is now a large number of newly homeless people in the city who just lost everything. It will be hard for most of them to keep their jobs and not spiral down into the depths of homelessness and be unable to return from it. Many of these people are likely to be unable to keep their job unless they can find a new place to stay on such short notice. Thank you for listening to the first episode of the Freedom Ledger. Tune in to Thursday, November 23rd, which happens to be Thanksgiving, for the next episode of the Freedom Ledger. And tune in to a couple minutes from now when we will get the first episode for the Daily Herald.